Just shy of 5 years ago, I was working in a cafe in Melbourne, earning minimum wage, scrubbing toilets at the end of the day, trading my time for money. And now, 5 years later, who would have thought that I would be able to work from anywhere, work my own hours, live the life that I've always truly dreamed of in Europe, my own apartment, adopting a dog and being responsible for her, and just having the most incredible community around me, being able to travel to different countries and have clients around the world, designing beautiful websites and helping people with their digital marketing and their online presence like that, being able to do what I love and what I'm genuinely naturally good at. What really gave me the best possible head start was doing this course called Square Secrets Business by Paige Brunton. She just came into my life at such a perfect time where I had no idea that you could even make this amount of money as a web designer back then. It's such an honor to actually have her on as a guest today on my channel and to interview her through her journey and more specifically like her thoughts on the evolution of AI and technology. She has some incredible resources as well to figure out what your unique blueprint marketing style personality is, and I'll obviously leave all of those links below. But this is such a thought-provoking, insightful conversation about whether or not it's too late to start a web design business, what to look out for, what to think about right in advance already, and what to prepare for, invest in, and how to essentially get started. So if you are a designer or you're thinking about getting into the web design industry or something in the creative industry and you're just wanting to have a feel for the people who have been in it for now like half a decade, almost a decade long, stay ahead of the game and figure out for yourself if this is going to be a strategic move for you to invest in yourself, invest your time, your energy, your resources into starting a business in this web design industry. Then tune in to this episode. It is going to be so insightful and I can't wait to hear in the comments below some of your biggest takeaways. So let's dive in. I'll see you on the other side. Ciao. So excited to have this conversation with you, Paige. And in the last couple of years, AI has been such a massive topic. And I know we feel it, everyone feels it. I'm curious from a web design industry. Do you feel like it dilutes the potency or even just how much web designers can charge now that AI can do a lot of things, or that people who previously didn't have access to the knowledge or to the tools, now it's so easy to do it? Do you feel like that kind of dilutes the potency of what we do? And how are you kind of seeing the future for the web design industry, being in that yourself?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so I spent an entire month. This was like last year before. And I was like, I want to learn and understand what is going to happen in the future of the world, because if this is going to take up my industry, then like I'm not going to continue working in this anymore. Like I'm going to go find something new to do with my life. So I spent a lot of time with that question. And so I spent time like reading books and listening to all the like podcasts and interviews with like the leaders in AI and trying to understand like what it was going to do and change in the world. And so the point to which it is at now in terms of website design and what it can do, obviously like copywriting is the thing that people are familiar with using it for, if that makes sense. Yeah. And also I use it a lot for like strategy and helping me like understand or like come up with ideas for things, let's say. So on the copy front, it's definitely useful, but obviously, as most people have figured out, is like if you don't spend a lot of time getting it educated on your brand voice and how you want things, and you also don't really, if you don't know what you want and then you go into AI and you're like, write me some copy for my website, it's not going to be all that fabulous.
No, there's like a tone that's like a very chat GPT tone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I do think that you can work with it, and you can, like, we use it for copy, and it is over time of having gotten like really putting a lot of time and effort into it, it has gotten good. So that's lovely. So we use it in that sense, especially because we did like a whole rebrand and then we had to change the brand voice because I needed to like mature it a good 10 years because I started my business in my early 20s, and now I'm like 10 years later, I'm like, I need to change up the voice a bit. Anyways, but when it comes to the actual like building websites aspect, if anyone has ever tried the like AI tools that exist, it's very mediocre what it is producing, like very not that great. However, obviously things will obviously improve over time, and so that will change and improve. Granted, I think that we also need to consider when we're thinking about like the web design industry is who are your typical clients and what are they coming to you for? So as someone who is a custom website designer, so you, Emily, and you are doing like high price projects and like complex projects and everything, is that just like putting content onto a page is not really like, if you are, you know, building the most basic website out there, or you are working like, how do I say this? There is so much to, say, a 10K web design project that goes beyond what you actually do on the page. Like there is business strategy involved. And then there is a lot of like, okay, we're taking you from this like old blog system and we're moving you to a new one, or we're adding, like we're setting up your email marketing and we're like integrating all your payment processors and all these things. It's like, and then there's also a lot of like client communication and like feedback and everything that happens. And so I feel like those are things which is not just I am telling ChatGPT or whatever AI tool or whatever, like, hey, produce me a website that has this on it or something. Like it's a much more involved project. Yeah. And so I do think that the jobs which are the most likely to be impacted soonest are things where it is a lot of the thing which I use ChatGPT for. I'm a proficient ChatGPT user. The things which I'm using a lot for is sort of advice related things. So like financial advice, health advice, nutritionist kind of like info, that sort of thing. That's so straight advice related stuff is the thing that I think is more, how do you say, sooner going to be impacted than something where you're, it's like you actually as a website designer need to go into, you need to manage an entire project. And it's not like just a clear, like say if it's something like bookkeeping, I also am so excited for the future of like bookkeeping and AI because I feel like that's like simple process. It's like so easy. It's like this transaction is this, and it just like, you know, auto does everything. Whereas when you're doing something as complicated as like a website migration project or like a redesign or something, like those are not necessarily simplistic things. And those also, it involves many softwares that you're using in that situation. And so AI's ability to do something like that is not anywhere close right now. So I think that when it comes to I do think the web design industry has many good years and potentially decades ahead of it. And it's also, there's a website called willrobotstakemyjob.com. I think it's what it's called. And it was also saying that like web design is one of those things that's like unlikely because while because it's such a project and there's so much like feedback and personal involvement related to it. I think that especially the custom web designer industry, like that's good for a long time. I do wonder about like AI's ability. So I do think that the first thing that will go in most markets is like the low end of the market. And so that's like if someone, these are people who didn't have a budget for a website designer in the first place, but they're like, I just need a basic something put together. Like they're going to be the ones who are like using the AI tools to knock together something quick and easy anyways. But those people weren't going to like custom designers anyways in the first place.
No, exactly. And you're already seeing that roll out even in Squarespace, like because we both use Squarespace as well. And you can even see Squarespace integrating AI with their platform, which is like build your own brand, power AI copy. Like you can just write something and it creates some copy for you. And that's perfect if you just need something really basic to get started, right? Like the low end. But then it's like the people who are in the middle, it's like you want to be careful not to market yourself down that end, otherwise it's like a slippery downward spiral. And you kind of, it's like how to go from this middle price point into the higher price point, because that's kind of where I think the opportunities are.
Yeah, definitely. I also think that a huge thing that clients are paying for is like confidence. And so like that's a massive factor. Is I have this person who is an expert and they've produced like amazing projects, and maybe I've seen those projects before. And like really making sure, like it's one thing to get an answer from AI and it's another to really trust the answer, if that makes sense. And then of course the other aspect is like as tools do get better, the people who work within that industry are going to be best and easiest and fastest able to understand those things and to make use of them, if that makes sense. So I do hope that in future, I mean, copy, yes, I found great uses and like sped things up in that sense. But in terms of the actual like website building tools, I've tried them and I'm like, it's easier and faster for me to do it myself. I do think that at some point, hopefully it'll get better so that we can be making use of those things. And I do think that, again, coming back to like, who is the client who tends to work with a website designer? It's already possible for someone to build a basic website by themselves. And so it's like those people are no longer going to website designers. But there is still a massive, massive, massive proportion of people who are just like, I'm running a business. I'm a dentist. I am a whatever lawyer. Like, I don't have time to do this. Someone just take it and do it for me. And like that, I definitely see still existing for a long time.
Yeah. And even just following on the top, because obviously, like, I also work with very different clients. And what I'm also seeing is like there's a lot more value towards the artistic expression and the visual experience of a website. Because art, it's so intangible, right? And what is something that AI can't replace is the feeling, the experience of working with you. And I find, because I also have a lot of wedding photographer clients, they come to me and it's like, sure, they could also just buy a template and like make do. Yeah. They have maybe usually their first website is like a DIY site. It's okay, it's a template. And then at some point, and I ask them, I'm like, you can just keep going with your site. You're booking great clients. Like, you don't actually need a new website, do you? But they're willing to spend like 8K, 10K on like a new branding, new website. And I asked them why. And they're like, well, I want it to be a reflection of like my work. I want to get featured in Vogue. I want to get featured in, this magazine and that publication. And there's a certain like level of brand image or confidence, like you mentioned. And that is something that I think AI can't really get to yet. And so in the end, like, I think one of my breakthrough realizations, like, I'm not actually helping, or I'm not selling a website. I'm not selling leads. I'm selling a feeling, actually. And my clients are also selling a feeling, because that is, in the end, what is kind of irreplaceable and why people buy in the first place. And for you, it's like you're selling this dream, this hope that they can break free from whatever job it is that they really dislike, that they feel caged in, right? And so you're also selling a feeling through your stories and through your branding. And so when I'm thinking about like what industries is AI going to have a hard time replacing, it's that personal one-to-one connection, coaching, experiences in real life, and also experiences in general. I think it's quite nuanced, no? So I think those are the things that I'm excited. I'm excited, actually, because I feel like AI coming in to take away a lot of those like mundane tasks that we're just like, why? Like, it brings us no joy.
Totally.
And it frees us up to like create art. I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing. Coming back to like simplistic processes. So like bookkeeping, that is a very simplistic process. Like, I don't think AI is going to file your entire tax return anytime soon, but it could help you with your bookkeeping. Same thing, like it's not going to completely take over you like migrating from like one website platform to another, or like using all the different like softwares and everything that are involved, and like you integrating the email marketing and making custom graphics on Canva and like making a video and everything to put on the website. Like, that's not happening, but maybe potentially like how do you say, like optimizing image sizes and like naming them and stuff. It's like that stuff which we do now, which is like the day that gets to be done by AI will be a great day for website designers. So simplistic pieces of the process I could see like in future, which I think is exciting.
Totally. And also with coding as well, and just like the user interface being a lot easier. But then it's like, you can have AI help with all of that, but then the vision is still yours. As a designer, it's like, what is your vision? And how do you interpret that and bring that into the world? So I'm excited. So for people who are thinking about joining the web design industry and they're like, oh, maybe it's too late. If I join, I might be falling into that like lower category that might get taken over. Like, what are your thoughts on people who are like thinking about starting their web design industry, but they're like what should they be watching out for, and how can they be careful not to be in that like lower end?
Yep. I mean, that's a good question regardless of AI, because it's like,
True.
really, I always say to people, it's like the faster that you can increase your confidence and therefore your prices, the easier your life is going to be, because higher end clients are literally easier to work with often. So, yeah, AI, no AI. What do you want to do? Okay. First thing and we spoke about this like in an interview that we did in the past. And it's basically like what I have noticed from thousands and thousands, I've taught thousands of people how to be website designers now. What I have noticed is that the mindset is a massive, massive, massive factor in how much you are charging. And so it has a lot to do with like someone's personal life experience too. So when I started as a website designer, I was like straight out of college. And so I was 23 or something, 25. I had not spent $10,000 on a project in my life because there was just nothing. Like at 23, you don't typically do that. And so the idea of charging $10,000 for a website design project to me was completely bananas when I started, because I don't know. I had never run a business. I didn't get that. And so I started off at lower end pricing, and over time, like built up the pricing. And so that took me an amount of time, a couple of years to do it. And then when I started with like teaching people how to be website designers, the thing which I noticed was that people who were often older, or I don't know, just had spent more money on like things before. So say they had hired contractors or interior designers or someone to help them with their copy or anything, like in personal life or in business, they were so much quicker able to up their pricing because their mind was like in a place where they were like, yeah, that's reasonable. That makes sense. That's very worth it or whatever. And so, and then the other factor of it is the like your own confidence in, I think your web designer skills is huge. And just your experience of having worked with clients and then therefore them being like, oh, that was amazing, or that was just like so worthwhile, or maybe one or two clients being like, man, I would have paid double for that. Like that's when people are like, oh, I could charge more. And so I do think that the key things. So I guess that my previous experience of being 20, whatever, when I started and never having paid 10 grand for anything, I couldn't really change that. But maybe like me saying that and giving that example will help someone realize like, oh yeah, because to so many businesses, they're like, take the money and just do the thing. And I'm so grateful. And that's like a very good, valuable ROI business investment for them. But the thing which you can work on now is your confidence as a website designer. So like genuinely making websites and getting feedback maybe from a community too, that's like, that is fantastic or whatever. I think that also goes a really long way. So doing whatever it is that you need to do, whether that's taking a course or doing a ton of like mock projects or whatever, or just doing a bunch of client projects over time, like that is really important to you raising your confidence and therefore being ready to charge higher prices. Because the weird thing about when you're a website designer is that it's not like you have a boss anymore who tells you, okay, now you get a raise of this much per year or something. It's like, no, you decide how much of a raise you get per year, which is very confusing to do the first time because you're like, oh, I pick how much money I make. And like, that just takes a minute to get used to, I think.
Totally. No, the pricing is interesting because I get a lot of people in the industry, especially creative industry, they're like, they make a huge deal out of like raising their prices and all these things. And for me, I was like, oh, I just raised my prices and like, then I'll just change them. And it's not a big deal because like, there's no one telling me, oh, that's bad that you didn't give everybody a heads up or something. It's like, I just do it. Yeah, but definitely like because the first year, I think I struggled with the pricing, but then you get into rooms with people who are confident, right? And it was really like working with mentors and seeing other people just being so confident and being in that frequency. I'm like, oh, it's not a big deal. But previously, especially like when you're working in a maybe normal 9-to-5 job, for me, I was like working in cafes, like minimum wage, And I was so in this hourly mentality of like,
Yep.
oh, if this takes me 10 hours, 20 hours, then I should charge this much. And it was so jarring that actually, I could be making so much money and it wasn't in correlation with my time because it's intangible.
It's about, so for anyone who's like, but then what is it in correlation to? It's in correlation to the value you're providing to that business. And the better you are at website design, the better that you understand your client's business and the more able you are to find solutions and solve problems for them. And when I say find solutions and solve problems, like that could be literally the most basic thing, which is like one time I had also in the wedding industry, a client come to me and they were like, okay, yeah, well, when I was like, okay, well, like what's the main goal of this website? And that's like, okay, well, the way that they, sell their venue, it was a wedding venue. The way they sell the wedding venue is to get couples to come in person and have like tour the venue and then they sell them on the venue basically. And so I was like, okay, it's not your typical thing where it's like, book a phone consultation or whatever. It's like, no, we need to book like an in-person meeting. And so they were like, okay, well, we can have them email us and then whatever. And I'm like, politely, I was like, there's actually something better we can do. Like we can have it where like we set up your like availability on your calendar and then we connect it to this like Acuity system and then we can set your availability and then they can just select online and book their like appointment with you and everything. And we can have it like set better for a time before and after and only at the hours that you're at the venue and all these things. And so that is like understanding the person's business, solving a problem. That's a very basic, simplistic problem, but it is definitely a problem. And so the more that you are able to create those solutions as the website designer, the more value your project has. The more you understand conversion best practices and design best practices, and you can build them a website that then they're going to feel confident to pitch themselves to Vogue. That's value. Yeah. And so that's what you're selling. You're not selling the number of hours that it takes you, if that makes sense, which I understand. Again, it takes a long time to get your brain around.
If you're an employee, yes, you are selling your time. But when you're a business, you're selling solutions.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
And it's completely different from time. Two things off of that. One is like systems. I think a lot of designers are so in this creative mode, but actually and they forget that you're still a business. Yep. And a business is profitable when you have systems. And you are like systems queen, right? So I'm more of this like creative, like flowing, recreate the system every single time. And then you were the first person that actually brought to my attention, like, these are the systems you need in your business for it to run. And for you to actually just know that it frees up so much mental capacity when you have systems. You're like, oh, this is the email that I send out. This is the package that I, propose. This is how it goes. And then for the client on the other side, they're like, wow, what an amazing experience because everything has been systematized. And I think sometimes we think when you systematize things, it takes away the personalness of it. And so as creatives, we want everything to have a personal touch, but then we recreate the wheel and we put so much time into it. But it's like, what if actually systems allows you to elevate your client experience rather than take away from it?
100%. So yeah, having an onboarding process and an offboarding process and like everything already like organized and ready to go when you want to take on a client, you have a client welcome package. So instead of you having to spend like an hour and a half on the phone being like, okay, and then you do this, and then you do that, and then I need your password for this, and I need your password for that. It's like you've sent it in a PDF, just looks so smooth, so slick. It can auto send from your CRM system. Like it can auto charge their future payments. Like when you get that whole situation running, it's like you have so much more time to do the creative work that you actually want to do. And so I do find it's interesting. I feel like students often, they come to me for like three main reasons. One is they're like, oh, how do I get clients past my family and friends? Second is I'm currently running a business or have taken on a few clients and it is an absolute gong show behind the scenes and I know it. And like I need to have a process and I need to have like an onboarding situation. And like, how do I get this thing to end on time? And like, why are they always dragging on and everything? It's like, that's the second main problem. Or the third main problem is like, I'm not quite sure my website designs are up to snuff. And those are like the three reasons I find that people are actually like, I need to take your course.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I really took it because I had never started my own business ever. And I wanted to, and I knew that I didn't have the confidence to charge my worth in that sense without having systems on the side that actually without understanding like how does a business actually run as someone who's only ever been employed. I'm like, oh yeah, what do
And
you
there's so
mean?
many things that you have to know and think about and do. And like,
Mm.
it took me a good amount of time to understand, like, oh, I should have a contract and I should like all these
Yeah.
things.
And the
Um,
faster, also the
yeah.
sooner, the faster you move through just like setting up your basic system, which is
Yep.
literally like basic foundations,
Yep.
then you can actually elevate to the next level, which is like
Mhm.
sales, marketing,
Totally.
mindset, energets, all of that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
you don't have that,
exactly.
you're like you
Yeah.
building on nothing. It took me way too long to realize that. Wish I had that earlier. The other strand was like talking about value for the client.
Mm.
I also think this is a common trap or misconception that people fall under is like, okay, maybe they think their services are worth, let's say, 6K.
Mhm.
But if the client that you're targeting, they're just starting out and they're not even making revenue,
Yep.
they're not that they're going to tell you your services are too expensive. But if you go
Mhm.
to someone who's making like 1 million
Yeah.
in their revenue a year, 6K is like, no, I'm happy to spend 10K, 20K on this, right?
Yep.
So it's not just like your service or the value that you know you can provide, but it's like what's the value of your client on the other side?
Mhm.
How much is their business worth?
Yep.
We
Yep.
forget that sometimes, and I think a lot of designers feel a bit disheartened when they target maybe yoga
Mm.
coaches or people who are just starting out in something like life coaching, and they're like, oh, it's not really working out. They won't even say yes to a $1,000 package.
Mhm.
And I'm like, yes, but they're not making revenue.
Yep, exactly. I feel like you are a really good example of this. So you work with a lot of these industries that are more like spiritual and everything, and things that people are like, oh, I don't know if like I can really make money working in that sort of industry or whatever.
Mhm.
Or the wedding industry, people often
Yeah.
question like, do people in the wedding industry have budget to like spend on a custom design and everything? And you do it very successfully. And I think that that is a good example, but it is true that as a website designer, you are not always, but typically working with people who are a couple years into their business, and it's typically like they have an old website, it was some sort of template, it was some sort of basic something they threw together themselves, they started running their business, it's doing well now they're ready. Like one of the main things that they want to do then is like get a professional website redesign. So yeah, you're typically not working with a brand new business owner starting from scratch. That's often not the case. Sometimes you are. Like I have had a couple of clients who were literally brand new and they were just like ready to go and from the get-go, and that was great and I was happy to do it. And those are very simplistic websites to do because they just don't have that much content or like everything. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And on the wedding industry front, well, it's a very profitable business. Just a side note, because they're usually booked out a year and a half to 2 years in advance,
Yep.
and so they know they have the revenue coming in,
Yeah.
and they know that they're kind of used to kind of preparing
Mm-hmm.
in advance. Whereas if you're dealing with a business that is like not currently making revenue, not sure if they're going to make
Yep.
revenue, that's the hard sell. But if you are working with people who like are planning in advance,
Mm-hmm.
that's a really good sell.
Yep.
And they can probably like double their prices or triple
Yeah.
like just, yeah.
Totally.
So,
Yeah. Once they get the website redesigned, like their legitimacy in the eyes of their clients goes up so much that they can raise their rates right after that. So
yeah.
very worthwhile to them.
Yeah. And so, okay, and people might be wondering, okay, cool. Then how do you find these people? Right. How do you, I'm sure we have different strategies here because it's always like what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious for you, your personal experience, and then maybe from your students, like what tends to work for people in terms of finding
Okay.
client, right?
Such a good question and something that I love helping people solve. So, the first thing which I will say is that the method which works for me or the method which works for Emily will not necessarily be the right method for you. And I fully believe that. So, there is not one right way that you can get clients as a website designer. And I've had so many students and they all do totally different things. And I'm like, how fantastic. And so, one thing which I would encourage everyone to do, if you go to pagebrunton.com/quiz, it is the which client finding method matches your personality type quiz. In literally like 45 seconds, you could find out which marketing method actually fits to you. Because I will just say that like I was on Instagram and I hated being on Instagram and I did not want to be on Instagram. And so I very unsuccessfully marketed my business on Instagram for a while. But what I did really enjoy doing was a blog, and I could just, I don't know, it was just fun to me and I could just sit there and whip out a blog post and no problem. And I really like creating long form content, and this like short form thing or social media was just never really my vibe. It's also interesting what I've noticed over time too is that like, so students who I have who are older than myself, they also will do marketing methods that like people in their 20s would literally never consider, which is like something like in-person related. Like one of the students actually like would go to the library and they would host like educational sessions for business owners on like their website and stuff. And then she would book a ton of clients from it. And that's just not like, that literally never crossed my mind that was
Brilliant.
something to do. And I was like,
Brilliant.
that makes sense. And so anyways, yeah. So the quiz I think is a really good starting point for everyone. And I would definitely recommend you go take that, because I think that that will just like, it will give you something aligned with what you're actually going to enjoy doing. And that is so important. And there are many options other than just like, so many people are like, Instagram, I have to do Instagram because it's visual and web design is visual. And so therefore that makes sense. But truly, like the other thing I want you to know is that like the vast majority of the successful students of web designer friends, which I have, are doing literally 1 to 2 marketing strategies. They're not doing 10 marketing strategies. Like they can get all the student or all the clients that they need just from that. And so, and there's marketing strategies which are more aligned to the different types of like offerings that you want to do. So say if you want to do like high price one-to-one client services, you're probably only doing like 20, 25 projects in a year. Whereas if you're like, oh, I want to sell templates, or I want to do something more like template restyles or whatever, or just VIP days, then you're going to need a greater volume of clients. And so different marketing strategies lend itself better or worse to if you want like a high volume business or like a lower volume, higher price business. So there's many factors to take into account. The other thing I will mention is I am hosting a bootcamp coming up. It's the 31st of March, 1st of April, 2nd of April. And on day 3, so there's 3 days, it's the Profitable and Productive Web Designer Bootcamp. On day 3, we literally just talk about like finding clients. And we will go through that, and I can like answer plenty of questions from you on it as well. So if that's of interest to you, I would definitely recommend start with the quiz, because I think it's really useful. You can do that now. Or also you can register for the bootcamp. We'll put the link below where you can join that.
Yes, love that. And highly recommend joining the bootcamp as well, because Paige often invites previous students who are, killing it in their business now, and you get to ask questions and they kind of tell you their own personal stories, how they get clients. And you've got so many different like personalities. Some people are more introverted, some people are more extroverted, some people are moms, some people are digital nomading around the world. Myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Emily was one of our panelists before, and she was fabulous.
Loved it.
And yeah, I really like so we do these like student panels where we like, basically I just like ask questions from the bootcamp group to the students. And so that's it's always really interesting. We try to get like a mix in there with the panels of like, okay, people who are like in different countries, or people who are moms, or people who are digital nomads, or people who are military spouses, or like all these like variety, or people who used to be virtual assistants, now they're website designers or whatever. And also people who do different marketing strategies and have different offers in their business. So we try to get like a mixture into our panel so that people can kind of see like all the different potential options.
Exactly. And I love that, because you see yourself in someone else, and you're like, oh my gosh, like that's possible for me, right? So beautiful. And like on the Instagram end, like I think I made a video recently about this as well, where the biggest marketing mistake I see is that most people market on Instagram, like literally 80% of their time, creating for Instagram stories, creating for Instagram reels. And this is just the front end. They actually have nothing in the back end. And I know you are back end marketing queen with your email marketing in the back, right? And I think, this is something that people forget. So of course there's different styles, different marketing strategies that work for people. But I do think like it's important to have something that you own in the back end, where you nurture the people who come through. Otherwise it's just like here, and then this is gap, and you're trying to sell them this, and there's kind of
different places which are better and worse for selling. And so your email list is the absolute best place to sell something, and your Instagram following is like, it's great for discoverability. It's great for getting people into like a very low priced offer, or to get them onto an email list where then you can build a deeper relationship, share your podcast or your YouTube videos or whatever. And again, you don't need to, I say these things, but also like you don't need to have 5 marketing strategies right now.
Yeah.
But like whatever that thing is that you choose, or just like having a regular weekly email can like, it can be like Instagram and a weekly email. And maybe those are your 2 marketing strategies. And again, that can like get you all the clients that you possibly need.
Yeah, totally. And for me, like what works quite well for me is after the pandemic. So like once we were back out in the world and socializing and all the things, is I love meeting my clients in person.
Yeah.
I don't even go to networking events per se, but I just get invited to dinners and I meet people at cafes, and you just talk about everything that's not business related. And then at some point you're kind of like, oh, that's interesting. You seem to know a lot about this topic.
Yeah.
And I never once like put my sales pitch in there. It's just like, they're just like, oh, are you like in design? Are you in sort of business?
Yeah.
And then we start talking about things and I'm just like giving them value, helping them, giving them some suggestions. And then at some point they're like, you know your shit.
Yeah.
Like, can
Totally.
we have a conversation about this?
Totally.
The amount of clients I've actually booked on that is great.
That's the other thing which I find really funny and interesting. So there's this girl who's in my mastermind, and she's like a branding and web design expert and like color expert.
Nice.
And she has literally redone the branding and the website of like half the people in the mastermind at this point. And so I was asking her, I was like, hey, I'm going to update like some guest experts in my course. Like, would love if you would come and talk about like networking. And she's like, I don't know if I can really talk about networking. I don't really do networking. I'm like, you're doing networking without you, like, that is like the term for the thing that you're doing without you even realizing that you're doing it. You're just like, and she's never pitching. It's never sleazy or scammy. She's just like in this group of potential ideal clients. And exactly as you said, just like having conversations, going to dinners and like chatting about whatever and not ever selling her services. And then they all book her. And so that is like accidental networking, let's call it. And that is definitely an option too.
And I am also quite allergic to the word networking, to be honest, because it just feels really sleazy. And I've been to a few networking events and everyone's just so predatory. It's kind of like this, like, this lack frequency. Work with me. And I think networking done right is really just making friends, finding people who you align with values-wise. Don't overthink it. Don't go to an event thinking you're going to network and get some clients. You're going to just make friends
and help people.
Help people who feel aligned with you. And that's really all it is. And I think when you look at it from that point, you're like, oh, like, it's not sleazy. Sales is not sleazy. It's really just, finding a solution.
That's the other thing is like, the idea of like selling myself sounds awful, but it was like, I could just do such a good job of my marketing, my like services page, that people would then just, and again, marketing, like the blog posts specifically for me were like huge. But again, that doesn't need to be for everyone by any means. But people like wanted to work with, like I wasn't having to sell myself.
Yeah.
People were just like, oh, I would love to work with you. And I was like, great, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, exactly. With masterminds, that's another interesting avenue you should go down as well, because I've been a part of a few masterminds myself, having coaches, mentors, and tying it back to the first initial point you mentioned, which was like, how can you charge high prices if you've never invested in something yourself? And I think that was something that I was also quite caught in. So before web design, I had freelance photography, and I always really struggled to charge for my photography side because I never invested in anything. And so I struggled. And why web design came easier actually was because I'd invested in your course. And I was like, I definitely need to make my investment back first.
Good. I love that was the motivation.
So I literally, within the week of actually getting your course, I booked in a 2K client. I was like, I am not going to invest in this and not get my money back. So that was the thing. And so when you have that almost pressure, you do make that back. And it's the same with masterminds. I invest in mastermind, I make it like 2x, 3x back because I just have that fire under my ass, right? And so for anyone who's like, what's a fast way to get to a point where I can feel worthy in my higher prices, just invest in, and then what it feels like. Actually, that's a big thing. If you've never invested a lot, thousands say, into a course or into a coach or a mastermind, you will never understand how that client on the other end will feel investing in you. And if you can know that feeling, you can actually hold them through that and make them feel safe in that. And then they're more likely to like book you because, you have that frequency.
Yeah, definitely. I love that.
Yeah. But with masterminds, like, and coaching, like, at what point, because I know humble beginnings, we all start DIY on our own. At what point did you kind of veer into doing courses or?
Okay, so I started my like web designer journey. I feel like a lot of people, it wasn't like a clear like, and now we start and now we whatever. But it was kind of like it all just happened over time. So the first ever website I did was for myself. I had built a blog and then I just like, redesigned the blog 12,000 times because I really enjoyed doing it. And then one day the like light bulb clicked and I was like, oh, it would make sense if I didn't just do my own website a million times, did some websites for other people. And so I was in my master's degree at the time. And I met a couple who ran a nonprofit. And so I like had this idea that I wanted to be a website designer, but I was like, well, I need a portfolio. And like, I also want to kind of test that I can actually do this. And so I was actually happy with the thing I produced. So I met this couple who ran a nonprofit. They said their biggest problem was their marketing and their website. And I was like, I can help you with that. So I did that one for them and I did that for free. And then past that, I started actually like charging. And so throughout the 2 years of my master's degree, I was doing web design projects like as a fun side hustle, earning on the side, which was wonderful, and just used it to like fund trips to go see my boyfriend in Europe.
Yeah. Really?
And then I graduated and moved over to Europe. And that's when I was like, okay, this needs to, actually pay bills now because I don't speak the local language. So I need to figure out how to make money on the internet. And so, yeah, that's how the web designer business started. And so I was running that and doing client projects for a good while. Until I got around to doing the courses. So the courses, the first one, I also started digital nomading at this point. So I was like, there's a lot of travel involved in these stories here, as Emily can relate. So anyways, I had moved to then Bali for a few months. And that's when I was like, okay, this isn't the most convenient time zone because my clients were mostly like Americans and Canadians. And so that is it's literally 12 hours different. Like it is the exact opposite. And so which is fine because honestly, like as a website designer, I had like 1 to 2 client calls per project. So like it wasn't that bad, but even still, I was like, I'm going to take these 3 months and I'm just going to like build this course. So the problem which I had was I had blogged so much that I like got to the top of the search results for Squarespace website designer, which then led to getting like an inquiry a day through the website. And I was like, that's a problem because I'm one person. And so then I was like, should I do an agency? Like that was the thing which made the most sense to me at the time. Or should I do a template shop or should I do a course? And so I actually decided to do a course. And so when I was in Bali, I took those 3 months. I didn't do any client projects and I just went crazy on making this course. And so it's called Square Secrets and I still have it to this day. It has been updated many times though, obviously. And so anyways, my goal at that point was like, okay, well, when I don't have capacity for a client or if they don't have the budget for my like prices, then I can just, teach them through this pre-recorded course and they can, build their own designer quality website themselves. And so that's when I started getting into the courses. So and so all of that, it was like a bit of those things all sort of like overlapped from one time to the next. So there was no like on this date I started whatever, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm curious, why did you choose not to go down the agency route?
I just don't want to manage humans. I have no interest. Like to me, that just means like meetings and I don't know. I just
feedback work and all these things.
I don't know. There was just a gut feeling where I was like, that is not for me.
And I think you actually have a very lean business.
Yep.
Which is
amazing. Which I enjoy. It brings me a lot of happiness. Like my freedom, my complete and utter freedom 4 days a week. And I only have 1 day a week where I like ever have a meeting. And even I mostly don't even meet with my team. It's mostly like meetings like this. So yeah.
So I like that. And curious because I know you've got some fun stories of masterminds and meeting Richard Branson as well, Necker Island, all those stories. Curious, what do you get out of, from your point, because you're already quite successful in your business, like what do you get out of being in these masterminds?
Oh, I love that. That's such a good question. What do I get out of them? Friends, like, and those friends become so more useful than anything else because it's like, so coming back to, I join a mastermind and I'm literally there to meet people and have fun. And that is my purpose when I go to like an event like that. And those friendships become so helpful, like on my phone, just like WhatsApp. Just, I have a long list of people who I can just send a voice message and be like, hey, having this problem, thinking about doing this thing, blah, blah, blah. Like, what are your thoughts? Do you have any experience? Whatever. And that is so stinking helpful. Because just the other day, I was thinking about changing something up for one of our course launches. And I wasn't sure if it was a good idea or not. And I'd listened to like some podcast episodes on it. And then I just messaged like into my mastermind group WhatsApp chat. And then also like 7 other business friends who I've met like over time. Just asked them all the question. And then they were like, yeah, no, not a good idea. Like this was my experience with it, or this is the problem with it, or whatever. This is what wasn't mentioned in that podcast episode about this like idea and everything. And I literally, had we implemented that project in the business, it would have taken us a good like 2 months to do it. And so I was like, we literally just saved ourselves 2 months of time from just me having friends in the industry. And those friends in the industry came from just like going. And that's the other thing, is like I only really do masterminds that have an in-person aspect, because I'm not interested to just sit on Zoom calls all the time. That's not fun for me. So yeah.
Love that. I love that. I love that. And again, that ties into like networking, but you're not networking, you know, and you're making friends. And I think sometimes in this solopreneur business thing, you can feel so lonely, and you feel like, oh, you have to do everything yourself. And the point where I like started to find my community in Lisbon, there's so many creative entrepreneurs here in Lisbon, and coaches and people doing amazing businesses, and it is so helpful. We have like a WhatsApp group as well. So like,
Totally.
even health related things. Who's got like grass-fed grass?
Grass-fed beef fat.
And like all the health side of things, and then like trip side of things, like who can recommend an amazing place to stay in? I know Azores or something. So it's like the most random things, and from also just like household things to business things to everything. It's like super handy. I love that. Last question I'm curious for you is, I feel like one of the things you do exceptionally well is storytelling.
Oh, thank you.
And I think that a lot of people who start out, when they think storytelling, they think copywriting, or they think it's telling people, I'm a mom of 3 with a dog and I drink coffee, right? And yes, that is storytelling, but I feel like storytelling, if you're doing it for business, has some sort of transformational component in it. And I'm curious, you probably don't think that you do storytelling really well because you just do it naturally. You're like really good at it. Where did you learn storytelling? Or was that something that you just kind of evolved over time?
Okay, this is really interesting. So thank you for saying that. That's very kind. So I know everyone will tell you that storytelling is super important in business. And I read a book on it once, and I only got like, I don't know, a couple chapters in, and I was like, this is not for me. This is not interesting. So I haven't like ever taken a course on it or read an entire book on it or anything, but I do get and understand that, just from my own experience, is that if you just tell someone a fact, or you tell someone a story of how you learned that thing, like that story of how you learned that thing is so much more interesting. And you can make whatever point, so like in any way, shape, or form. So if I can think of an example of like, okay, I realize this thing, or this is something I need my ideal client to like, a belief they need to shift, or something that's like holding them back from whatever they want, then if I can find a story of myself or a student, like that's something that we do a lot of too, which I really enjoy, is like we do these student success stories. So when students have like hit certain revenue numbers in their business, then we ask them to come on. We do like an interview like this, which we've done one with you, which we can link down in the description if you want to see Emily's. And so just from, I guess, having this like collection of my own life experiences and like running the business. And so anytime I do have an experience which led me to a realization, like I just know that telling that story, starting off that way, is going to be, it's going to stick so much more in someone's mind, for one. And 2, now because like we've had so many students with so many different stories, it's also nice that I get to tell different stories, because it's kind of like I only have so much experience, and I feel like I've actually become, it's interesting, like so much better as someone to educate people on being a website designer, since I've had so many students and now had so much interaction with them all, because I can give you like so many examples of like different situations where someone will ask a question about niching, and I'm like, okay, well, here's a freaking amazing example of like someone who niched super well, or here's an example of someone who didn't niche at all and how they're doing really well. And so it's like, so I guess in terms of advice I would give to someone else on storytelling, anytime you're trying to make a point, do you have a life experience that led you to that realization is a great way to start something off. And two is, if you like, it can also be other people's stories. It doesn't necessarily need to be your own, or it could be a story that you heard from someone else. Like that's something which I remember, great story, here we are. As Nathan Barry from ConvertKit, he said this in a really old blog post, but again, it stuck with me, like, I don't know how many years later. And he was saying that when he had been teaching himself how to code, and there had been another guy who had also been teaching himself how to code. The other guy like blogged the process of teaching himself how to code. And then when this guy went to go launch something, I think it was an ebook or a Kickstarter or something, he got so many backers or purchasers or whatever because he had already like built an audience, and he hadn't positioned himself as like, I am the coding genius and expert. It's just like, here is what I am learning this week or something. And Nathan started following that. And then he realized when Nathan wanted to launch something, like, oh, I don't have anyone who's like knows me or anything. And so it's like, this guy sharing these things was what led him to realizing like the importance of an audience. And so I was like, oh, and that story sticks, does it not?
Interesting you say that, because what came to me just now was like, when you tell a story, or good storytelling, especially in business, it gives the other person value. Actually, someone gets something out of it. So the person who blogged, he's actually giving value to 10,000 people or however many viewers. And it's almost that like goodwill, and you're giving value. And so why some stories flop and other stories do really well, it's like one story might just be for you and no one is actually getting value from it, but the other stories you tell, it could be your own, it could be your client's transformation story, but the value they're getting out of it again is a feeling of like, it's possible for me, or that this is the step I need to take to solve my problem. And so when you tackle storytelling, which you do really well, is, hey, here's a gap, this is how you can get here, and this is like all the people I've helped to get across to this point and have this business with this lifestyle freedom, right? And so I think that really is the crux of good storytelling.
I agree.
Storytelling that gives value. I love that. Amazing. So good, Paige. I love this interview. Yay. Thank you for your time. And we're definitely going to link all of the links below, Bootcamp and the quiz, right?
Yes.
And for anyone who is thinking about joining the Bootcamp, or just thinking about starting their web design business in 2025, so any last words of wisdom or advice that would help them get there faster?
Yeah, I would definitely say, honestly, genuinely, like the bootcamp will be the most freaking useful thing you have ever done this year for like starting a web designer business. It is a profitable and productive web designer bootcamp. It is 3 days of incredible trainings and a bunch of interviews with myself and a bunch of past very successful students, some student stories that you can listen to. And then we also have like Q&As, and we have a giveaway. It's like a really fun event. We do it inside of a Facebook community. It's a lovely time. And a really good chance also for you to like also make some friends in the industry, which again, as we have talked about, are very important to like have other people who are doing the same thing as you, because then you can, ask questions, bounce ideas, that sort of thing. Save yourself months of times on a project if you're like, can get a good answer on that sort of thing. So yeah, I would definitely recommend. I think that bootcamp is genuinely, we start from the beginning in it. If you're like, I feel completely insane to even want to be a website designer because like I don't really have a background in it, don't worry, you're going to be like in good company. It's totally fine. Emily was an accountant, a tax advisor.
Accounting, tax consulting. So I've done many things, guys. Freelance photographer, kayak guide, barista.
I had been a college student before, and I did not study anything website related in college. So
yes, you don't need website
so if you're just web designer curious and have a completely unrelated experience, you are more than welcome to come to bootcamp, and that's totally fine.
Especially if you have zero business knowledge, join. I think it's
really good.
You're going to get a lot out of it. And for anyone who's thinking about it, or even just in the future thinking about joining Paige's course, and you're like, oh, I don't know if it's for me, etc., and you want someone for example myself who's been through it, you've got questions or just even about the process, just I'll drop my Instagram below. You can just message me. Always happy to share my experience and going through things. And if I can help, then
Thank you
it'd
for
be
doing
amazing.
that. I know so many people, like when they're considering it, they do message a lot of past students and they're like, hey, what are your thoughts? So thank you for
Actually,
saying that.
no, actually, so many. Even in just like the last launch you had, I got a lot because off the back of the panel, got quite a few people reaching out saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about this course or this course, or I'm thinking about like I have a side business. Is this actually going to be worth my while?" And for some of them, it's actually not the
Yep.
best choice, and I tell them that. For other people, it's perfect, and they jump in, and I'm like, "Wow, this is amazing." So,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we like to do the same thing. Honestly, I'm like, if it's not for someone, I'll be like, I would recommend you go do this or
yeah,
whatever. So yeah,
exactly, amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Paige.
thank you.